and this is why I want to sort of focus on the lack of tools, the lack of emotional tools that
Mm-hmm.
men are provided with. And I hate to use passive voice there, but we focus a lot on fathers
Mm-hmm.
with boys. We don't focus enough on the mothers and the attitudes about and towards women that men have come from their mothers just as not, if not just as much, if not more so than their fathers.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that Jonathan Majors struck me as a guy who needed support and validation. And that's why I say demanding it is not the same as wanting it. Everybody needs a certain amount of validation.
Oh, absolutely.
And he just strikes me as a guy who was chewed up and spit out and didn't know what to do about it. And we'll see. We'll see if he can recover. It's going to be really hard because let's face it, there's different things that, well, men and women can get away with, but there's different things that different men can get away with as well. I mean, Robert Downey Jr., everybody forgets it wasn't just that he was addicted to drugs. He had an illegal gun in the car when he was stopped.
I did not know that
Well,
part.
that it's just gone away. You know, the whitewashing of Robert Downey Jr.'s personal history is a thing to behold. And what's fascinating is he tried to do it for Mel Gibson and it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And I get, I think Robert Downey Jr.'s heart is in the right place with Mel Gibson, but it seems like Robert Downey Jr. has learned some lessons, clearly not enough lessons,
Mm-hmm.
but Mel Gibson doesn't seem to have learned his lesson. And this is really hard with men, with once you've got caught doing the bad, then you see some people get a second chance and some people don't. And that is hard. That is hard to form, moral, ethical pathways, ethical structures when you just see double standards everywhere. And they end up blaming women
Yeah.
for those double standards. And it's really not women.
No. And Tim Allen was another one who got a second chance, though people mock him now
A,
for being
a
right leaning.
second and a third and a fourth. He just said something about dogs the other day
Oh
or
God.
something. I that guy, like, people don't remember him enough to care that he's Buzz Lightyear, but they
Mm-hmm.
tried to get rid of him and then the movie flopped. So, it's just, I don't know. There are some people. Chris Brown is the one that really bothers me because it just feels like, because Chris Brown never tried to be anything but ghetto hip hop trash. And I use that term very, very specifically. Please hear me out before you call me a racist white woman. He played those stereotypes because he didn't try to be Yale the way Jonathan Majors did.
Mm-hmm.
He literally got away with beating the shit out of Rihanna. There is no denying he did it.
And the way some women supported him, even saying that Rihanna must have done something to deserve it.
Oh, that's a very common narrative, and it's not it's not, I don't know how to say this. It's an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
It's an excuse. It's, yes, it was the phone thing again. We really need to talk about that there are ways of handling it when, because what happens in a lot of those circumstances, because I've had conversations with women who are Chris Brown defenders, who are Tory Lane's defenders, and they're not the people who you think,
Mm-hmm.
but they say because they've seen women in their families do it, they push every button a man has until they go insane and lose their shit. And the argument is that they know how to make them lose their shit. The point is to make them lose their shit. That's toxic relationship territory.
I mean, we also see the same thing in reverse, don't we?
Oh
Because
yeah.
something I've seen a lot in my life is you'll get a couple, and you especially see this in the church. Not just there, but it's especially there where the man has a reputation and he's supposed to be a pillar of the community
Mm-hmm.
and everything looks great on the surface,
Mm-hmm.
but behind, and even in public, the wife will say, oh no, he's great, he's a good man, whereas behind the scenes everyone is walking on eggshells because of his temper,
Yep.
because of alcoholism, because of something. But his reputation is so good, and he's so good at keeping his abuse closeted
Mm-hmm.
that when she snaps and she can't handle it anymore, it's her fault. And everyone sympathizes with the man saying, oh, yeah, it was something wrong with her when she was driven to it, but no one knows the abuse. And like, if you want to talk about a patriarchy,
Yeah.
patriarchal society,
Yeah.
Taylor Swift in her Person of the Year thing was saying that, patriarchy is all about like the flow of money and capitalism. Oh, God, no. But if you want to talk
Wait,
about
what?
patriarchy,
Finish your thought. I want to loop back around on that, but
yeah, no,
finish your thought. Yeah.
the idea of capitalism as patriarchy pisses me off. But so this idea of the man making sure he looks so good in public so that when she can't handle it anymore and she snaps, she's the toxic one, she's the problem.
Yeah.
When
That
it's
I think that's the reason Hillary Clinton's not president, personally. I know Hillary's an unpopular figure, and I'll get to her in a bit, but that happened when Clinton, with the whole impeachment thing.
mm-hmm,
There were all these stories of Hillary going crazy and beating him up and all that stuff. And to read Hillary's side, she never admits to violence, but to read her side, she was like, we were a single income family with a child. And she'd put her own legal career on the back burner because it was considered so unpopular, the whole staying home and baking cookies line.
mm-hmm.
It was a really awful position for her, where basically all she wanted to do is hide and cry and feel sorry for herself, but she was expected to go out and defend him.
Well, I mean, plus the whole Monica Lewinsky thing wasn't his first infidelity.
No.
I mean,
And
there is a little part of me that, like, hearing her say they're a single income family, and I'm like, you guys make more in a year than I
except
I have ever.
they were so in debt. Yes, they do
Oh.
make a lot of money, but they were so in debt from various things. The Clintons are new money.
Mm.
And the Rodhams were actually, Clinton was, by the standards of that environment, um, a bumpkin. And that was part of where his insecurities that caused him to cheat came from. But I did find the focus on Hillary and her, lack of fuckability. And I use that term. I don't say desirability. It's fuckability.
Oh
It
yeah.
let's be, because we're talking about toxic men and toxic masculinity here. Let's go here. It's the Kanye West, I could still fuck Taylor Swift thing, which is
Mm-hmm.
just, no one was right in that whole thing was just disgusting. And the fact that she was in on it, they're both trash. They're both just trash there. Uh
Yeah.
and but that whole fuckability of women thing, which is something that has always bothered me. And it started bothering me when I was really very young and heard the plastic surgery horror stories of the female news anchors at the
Mm-hmm.
TV station over, because I was trash, right? I was the woman who did the jiggle show. So the news anchors were the ones that, Oh, they were serious. They were intellectuals. They were all getting plastic surgery because if the belief was that if the male audience didn't want to sleep with them, they couldn't read the news.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, there were constant jokes about the male anchor's man boobs. It was just such a double standard. And I was nothing about me was good at the time. So it's this double standard for women where if men do want to sleep with you, it's not good. If men don't want to sleep with you, it's worse.
It's always so bizarre to me to hear you talk about how like you weren't enough. You're gorgeous. Like
Oh,
I
no, I am Hollywood ugly. I am Hollywood fat. I am Hollywood ugly song. There were situations where I was ready to do a comedy bit at an award show and the producer pulled me off last minute and stuck in a 19-year-old. I wasn't much older at the time, but this one that was cuter and she was terrible. She froze up on camera, but she was skinnier and she had green hair or blue hair and tons of glittery makeup and all that stuff. And it was just clearly a guy in his 40s freaking out and going, they just, 18-year-old boys, they just want sex. They just want sex. It doesn't matter what a woman's ability is. And it's not the young men. It's the older men putting themselves in the shoes of the young men.
and it's like I do understand that, but it's still so baffling when you say that because like I I've seen Ed and Red's night party. I've seen your pinup photography, and I'm like,
Don't forget though, that was pre-shapewear. That was the late 90s, early 2000s. That was fat.
yeah,
That was fat. And it's staggering to think of that now, especially being now where I was fat then and not good enough. And now I'm even worse because the minute you hit 40, oh my God, people start openly talking about your lack of fertility in front of you, including your own family.
yeah,
And this all goes back to, when Taylor Swift talks about patriarchy, we don't have a word for what it is, but it is this knock-on effect. It's not patriarchy, right?
mm-hmm.
Because men are like, we're not in charge. What are you talking about? Don't blame us. Totally fair. It is this idea that the only power women have is reproduction because it's the one thing men can't do.
Yeah.
Right. And so there is this poison.
Well, except for trans men.
Except, but they don't want to. That's the thing. Like trans men are like, no, no. I mean, that's a really toxic thing among trans masc guys because the whole thing about men can get pregnant people, that triggers the body dysphoria of every trans guy I know.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, what? They clearly didn't talk to a non-binary person giving birth.
Well, there have been stories in the news celebrating like, oh yeah, this man gave birth to a baby with his female partner, but the mother is a trans woman and the father is a trans man. And it's like, it's stuff like this where like I don't even blame people on the right for getting a bit up in arms, like, what the fuck is this?
The stories I've read is those were cases where it was literally the only option because surrogacy and adoption in the US, trans couple not happening. Surrogacy, perhaps, but there is still so much stigma that they fought down the body dysphoria to have a family. And there's this thing among certain trans people that they can't talk about how awful certain things are for them because they have to be model trans people.
Mm-hmm.
And can't say, these things were difficult because they feel like they have to say, no, it's perfect and I never regretted it and everything. And it just leads into the idea that transition is something that they just wake up one day and decide to do.
Yeah.
It's not.
Well, I mean, I'm still convinced that the whole reason Blair White has started going off on her whole detransitioning and young people who want to transition don't understand that they're losing their fertility is because she tried to halt her transition to save her sperm and found out it was too late, so she can't have biological children. And I'm convinced that that has affected the last 10 years or so of her trajectory.
Okay, I'm going to be really unpopular and do something I know somebody this upsets people. So what? Having
Yeah.
biological children is a great thing if you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
But this is that toxic thing, right? It's when this is I need biological children instead of it would be nice. This
Yeah.
is when I start questioning the motives of the person doing it. Whenever you hear a guy going off about that's my kid, it's my kid. Is this another human or is this a possession, sir?
And I mean, we see that with a lot of parents who they just want their kid to act and behave a certain way, like
Yeah.
it's an accessory.
Yeah, and there's a big difference between God, I miss my kid. I want my kid in my life because I love them. And that is my kid. It's mine. Like, no, that's a
Mm-hmm.
human. That's the difference. See, that's how subtle toxic versus non-toxic is.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, it comes down to, is the emotion authentic and perhaps just awkwardly put? Or is this a sign of, frankly, profound narcissism and a lack of empathy for other people, a lack of an ability to see other people as people?
Yeah.
And I do think, I mean, that's when we get into male men and emotional vocabulary and how it really muddles the issue. And I did a thing where I put up the emotions wheel on Manly Monday. Was it Manly Monday? No, it may have been a Wellness Wednesday. I didn't want, because I'm so hesitant to drill down on that thing about men and emotional vocabulary too much, because is um the data is very stark. It's very clear.
Mm-hmm.
But the way men express emotions, there was this great moment on the Discord not long ago where we went from Warhammer references. Well, somebody said I'm not doing well, and it went from that to Warhammer references, to dick jokes, to wine pairings with fancy food in about 6 moves. And it felt very bonding. It really did feel like a moment, and it was because a guy was able to express he wasn't doing well, and the conversation moved on. There
Mm-hmm.
was no shame. He was still treated as a guy, and that's very real. They're expressing emotion should not feel emasculating. That's a sign something's wrong. And so we have to thread the needle, and we're terrible at it as a culture, going from men need more practice actually expressing feelings when they express their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the emotions wheel is such a great tool, so they can look at it and pick one.
Well, I mean, I told this story a while ago where there was a point where I got angry,
Yeah.
but I took a step back and I looked at it and I said, okay, I don't want to poison anyone. I don't want to claw anyone's eyes out.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not angry, I'm hurt. And it
Yeah.
just feels like anger because a lot of times when we have a strong surge of anything,
Mm-hmm.
we tend to automatically call it anger when there is so much more. And I think that, oh, that's it. That's why I got in trouble so much as a kid, was because I had really big
Yeah.
emotions. And it would just be song, you need to get your temper under control. And it's, then I'd get mocked because I'm a redhead with a temper.
uh,
But, and honestly,
and
I'm just
every
realizing
time every time you get mad, it's the hair. It's not
it's the
legitimate.
hair.
Yep.
But I'm really just now realizing this as I say it. It wasn't even anger all the time. It was just these really big emotions,
Yep.
but they were always quashed and
Yep.
quelled, and I had to lock them down.
Yep.
And then they would come out as anger. because I didn't know how to express myself. And I think that's what a lot of guys deal with is it's, oh, well, guys are angry. So if they have a big feeling, it must be anger. And then they try to suppress it. And that's just toxic. And that turns into more anger. And like I said, that one time a few months ago, I thought I was angry. There was a little bit because, the person I had been interacting with had said something that I'm like, fuck you.
Yep.
You don't say that.
Yep.
But at the same time, he was in a really emotional position as well. And so,
And you know what? That does not negate you don't need to say that. There are different ways of expressing things.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like, we worked it out and things calmed down.
Mm-hmm.
But I did take that step back and go, oh no, I'm hurt.
Yep.
And so, like us, long of the short of what I was saying, we do need to be able to take a step back and look at emotions and be able to break them down. And that's what it comes back to
Yep.
with being able to name those emotions. And if you don't have names for them,
Yep.
then you can't figure out how to express them. And
Yep.
that can also just lead to confusion, which,
Yep.
part of why the Hulk is always mad is because the Hulk is always confused because he doesn't have banner brain.
Yep.
And so he doesn't understand things.
Well, see, I love
So,
the Hulk because it's a shining example of it doesn't matter how smart you are when your emotions are overwhelming. And I do think that a lot of toxic male behaviors, toxic men, come down to not being actively discouraged from expressing feelings, therefore never learning to name and process feelings. And therefore it is, I mean, that what you just described is, overwhelming emotional states, and the more they're squashed, the bigger they get. That's the only difference between men and women, is what emotional states are squashed.
mm-hmm.
The one thing I noticed about the Jonathan Majors trial is how many times his ex-girlfriend ran out of the courtroom crying.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they describe her as just being a wreck. And
and see,
that if
I'll admit that automatically sets off a red flag for me.
well, me too, because this is stuff that happened months ago. There's been time to get used to it. It does feel, I have a real issue when um women take advantage of the fact that there's certain things that they can do and men can't.
Mm-hmm.
I have a real, because I don't have those expressions naturally. I wish I did, because my reactions are more masculine. I feel for guys whose natural reactions are more what would be considered feminine, because then we get the people, on streams making fun of Astarion's trauma responses in Baldur's Gate 3 and thinking that isn't showing that they're just horrible fucking people.
Yes.
And we were going to talk about the misunderstanding of that character. I guess now's a good time to do it, because we did tease it in the first part. But I think that character is almost accidentally amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I really, part of the reason I'm so happy that Neil Newbon won the Game Award, even though I don't care about the Game Awards, I'm so happy he was rewarded for taking some of the shittiest dialogue I have ever read in my life and managing to get through the read. He really did bring us something to that character.
I mean, I was pulling for Ben Starr, who voiced Clive in Final Fantasy 16. But it's like, I watched the Astarion actors clip and I'm like, he's so happy and so sincere. And okay, from what I've seen, the performance was great. Okay, I don't resent this.
The difference between what's on the page there and what's on the recording, what he does with it, it's like, Yeah, no, he deserves it. He deserves all the awards, he deserves all the flowers, he deserves everything, because that character, as written, overwritten, one,
Mm-hmm.
fucking insufferable, two. I
And,
mean, there's a whole scene where he's fishing for compliments and then insulting you if you get it wrong.
and that's the thing that perplexes me about all the Astarion fangirls, because I have seen so much sexy Astarion fan art in the last few months. I,
And you know what's amazing about that is they don't understand that that is continuing his abuse.
and that's the thing, isn't it? Is, back when we first started this podcast,
Yeah.
we talked about the bad boy
Yeah.
and how the bad boy has morphed into the toxic boy.
Yeah.
And so much of what we see nowadays that's purporting to be, oh, that was a big word, purporting to be the bad boy
Right.
is incredibly toxic. But
Right.
like that's an interesting twist where you take someone who, like Astarion, is pretty toxic, but like the sexualization is an extension of abuse.
Yeah.
And it all kind of fits together though, doesn't it?
And we
Just
get we get into these thing where he's a forfer in terms of there's so much confusing his sexuality for other aspects of his character, because
I
the
need a
whole
definition of forfer.
okay, okay, in terms of I'm stealing it from Echo, is considered, she's non-white, a woman, disabled in two ways. She's a forfer. I forget the other one, but
Okay.
it's like black transgender lesbian.
Okay.
You
So
got four
it's
things. You're a woman,
okay.
you're gay, you're transgender, and racialized.
Okay.
And so Asterion, he's the whole gay or British thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then he's an elf and a vampire. And there's this interesting thing where you never actually see a woman associated with Asterion. And I'm trying to figure out if that's because his the he uh ended up a vampire thrall because he was beaten up he was a magistrate in Baldur's Gate 3. And so he went from a position of a lot of power to a position of no power, forced to eat rats, right? Because Cazador, right place, right time, become a vampire or die.
Mm-hmm.
And they have this awful relationship with Cazador, where Cazador did not just bully, he could physically control his thralls. So he could make them do anything he wanted, absolutely anything. And it didn't matter how painful it was, they had to. It wasn't even submission, it was being completely out of control. And there's another scene where Asterion comes along one of his early victims, a man named Sebastian, who, like Asterion, was just sort of in the wrong place at the wrong time. Boy was very naive. Asterion seduces him. And, Asterion comes face to face with the very shit thing he did, but did he really have a choice?
Mm-hmm.
But then there are other scenes in the game where you can put Asterion in physically compromising situations. You can choose to have a foursome with this brother and sister drow prostitute couple. And you can choose to coerce Asterion into biting a creepy drow woman for a +2 strength modifier to your character. And he objects to the biting. He checks out if you do the sex. He's technically excellent and dead inside. And the other significant thing, we get into why Asterion fangirls are creepy, is he has never bitten a human before he feeds on the playable character, what they call the avatar,
Mm-hmm.
in the game. And so my read on it is the reason that he actually reacts worse to biting creepy drow chick is because she's clearly got a fetish for vampires. And to him, it's like the certain sex acts that prostitutes will do with clients and not with people they're romantically involved in. Biting has an emotional component for him. Sex is just something he does because he knows people like it. And okay, it feels good, but it's messy, right?
See, in theory, I like how thirsty this game is. Like, we've all
so
seen my
toxic,
art. We know
though.
what I do. But like everything I actually hear about it from, I've already talked about why I don't like the bear sex, because I think it feeds into certain stuff that's going on with like the
Halzen's
zoophiles.
I don't know what to think about Halzen. I am doing a deep dive second playthrough with characters, and Halzen's one of those. I can't get past the fact that he is uncontrollably sexually violent and his bestie is a child spirit.
That, and it's like, you know, you're describing the foursome with the Drow siblings. I'm like, okay, but this isn't just thirsty. This is fucking weird.
I did like that it confirmed something. I didn't take it. I asked somebody else and then watched a playthrough, because my first thing was nope, nobody is touching Asterion unless he says so. He objects, done. He makes choices. He's been abused. Nope. He will be protected. And the fact that they actually made that, it's so deliberate, which is why I think the Shadowheart stuff, they didn't intend to make her as toxic as she actually was. But the fact that male abuse victims are still abuse victims.
Yeah.
And drawing sexy Asterion fan art, if he was a real person, would be no different than perpetuating the abuse of anybody, where being forced into sexual situations that you do not want, but your body is responding. That is a huge thing with male victims of sexual abuse. It fucks guys up in a unique way, because the body does respond sometimes just due to physical stimulation, even though you don't want it emotionally. That is very real. And it's this whole idea of men can't get raped because, how could you get it up? It happens. It's a real thing. We don't talk about it as much. And that's why with the creepy Asterion fangirls, you're not a fan of the character if you don't understand the character.
And like, what you were saying about, we don't talk about these victims. I am so sick of every time a female teacher is caught preying on a male student, headlines never call it what it is.
Nope.
I saw one recently that even called her attractive teacher sentenced for relationship with student.
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck you very, very much.